So.
Although, do you want to, maybe I should ask you what's behind you first, because, I'm not sure we want to record that because they can't see it. So Tammy, what is behind you?
I have our new podcast, Overcoming Betrayal and Addiction podcast cover as my screen image on this webinar, because so this whole idea was Dr. Rob's. He likes the Brady Bunch look that we get when we do
Squares.
Zoom. Oh, Hollywood Squares. I hadn't heard of that one. I mean, I know that show, but I hadn't heard of that with this. It was Brady Bunch. So regardless, so they, our graphic person designed this and made it funky colors and cool.
We look just like that, Tammy, don't we?
Absolutely, in our avatar world. So
yeah, that's right.
We've got questions.
I just want all of you to know we did a lot of work editing, probably hundreds of hours of stuff Tammy and I done together, and much of this other information, and it's all there, and it's all there forever. We have tons and tons of podcasts that are going up. And if you wonder who that bald guy is, that's me. And if you wonder who that really beautiful young woman is, that's Tammy. And, hey, I'm a sex addict. I know how to do this.
There you go. Well, and let me just put your Sex, Love, and Addiction podcast had, last I checked, over 460,000 downloads on that particular. So it's very popular, Sex, Love, and Addiction. And tons of great information.
It's all free.
All free. So, Louis Stanger was on there. I haven't listened to that one yet, so it's good stuff. So, okay. So first question, my sex addict husband and I.
Wait, did you start recording? Oh, you did. Good.
Yes, I did. My sex addict husband and I have felt like we've been in flat, disconnected limbo since discovery, with moments of emotion, connection, triggering, etc. We are getting close to disclosure, and I just wanted any thoughts you would share to help us get through it and what to expect on the other side of disclosure. Thank you.
So Tammy, I'm not sure, what are they trying to get through exactly?
I think the volatile situation. So I think giving them some help as to, this is early recovery. You haven't had disclosure. This is all normal.
Why don't you go ahead and do that? Go ahead and do that.
I'm kind of doing so well. This is all normal. Dr. Rob talks often, or we talk about how you can't be each other's support. You need to have support so you can talk about what's going on for you without talking to the other person and having it be a trigger, and then it's this vicious cycle with that. So get support for each of you. Those drop-in meetings that are on sexandrelationshiphealing.com are great places for partners or the addicts to get
free
help.
They're free,
yes. Listening to these podcasts, listening to the webinars, all good stuff. So what to expect from disclosure, Dr. Rob talks all the time, is about a building. It's just a foundation. Like, it's not a magic thing that makes it all better. It's just giving you this foundation of honesty on which to build. So it's, the addict taking ownership for, this is what I've done. It's data. It's not emotion from the addict going, oh, I'm so sorry, forgive me. It's like, here's what I did, here's how much I spent on it, this is all, when I said I was going on that business trip, I wasn't, whatever. It's validation for you, just so that you have that foundation of trust on which to build. But then there's still lots more repair to be done.
You're being kind, Tammy. It's going to hurt a lot.
It is going to hurt a lot.
So thank you for that, because I think being patient with yourself and not expecting that you should be like this or you should be like that as a couple or individually. I mean, you're in crisis. I was thinking earlier when they started talking, like, well, how would I be if, well, I'll give an example. When my father was passing away and I knew he was sick and it was a few months, I think I was very flat. I think I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was just really kind of in a thoughtful place. And I think it's kind of like that, something's coming, and emotionally you're kind of trying to prepare yourself for it, and as a couple too. So I think that, quite honestly, I think flatness before an event like this is a lot better than what Tammy and I often see, which is more like dish throwing kinds of things. So, I would, again, lower your expectations of how this time is going to be. And also, how disclosure is. I wrote down another metaphor. So I was just at the doctor, and I thought I'd broken a bone. I didn't. But the idea that the bone's already broken, You know, what's going to happen in disclosure is they're going to touch it, they're going to feel, they're going to figure out exactly, you're going to get a lot more information about the hurt, and then it's going to get bandaged up, and it's not going to be all better for a while. But it won't be acute, and there will be answers. It will be put back together. So, you know, you've been walking around with the bones that don't fit together. They're going to get fit back together, but it's going to hurt. But after that, there's a possibility for real healing. Otherwise, it's still disconnected and disjointed. Wow, I love that metaphor.
I was actually thinking that's a really good one. There's lots of tidbits that you say that like come to my mind when I'm answering the phone and things, and I say, Dr. Rob shares, you know, da da da. So
well, you know, and I'm endlessly fascinated with myself. So, you know, I'm never bored. But let's go on. Let's not talk about me. Let's go on to the next question.
Okay, the next question. If a sexually addicted man is not in consistent recovery program with accountability, will he relapse? My thought is he even sober?
Yeah, I think that what Tammy says is absolutely correct. I mean, I think the measure of someone's healing and recovery is the time and energy that they put in, especially in the first couple of years. And so if you tell me he's in recovery, but he doesn't do any of those things, it's like, well, he's not in recovery. I wouldn't trust, pardon me, I wouldn't trust anything that comes out of the mouth, you know, and you're back where you started. Because trust is, couples ask us all the time, how do we rebuild trust after so many horrible things have happened and so many lies and so many secrets? And the answer is you can only rebuild trust with honest actions over time. That person has to consistently show up for things that they know are good for them, whether they want it or not, that you know are good for you as a couple. And when they're not doing that, they're not just backing away from their own healing, they're backing away from the relationship. That's not good.
Well, and I was thinking, you know, there's abstinence where I'm just not doing that. And then there's, you know, sobriety, which I think, okay, you're now putting that together. And then recovery is living a different way. And what I often see, in fact, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, and it was like, you know, okay, they've quit doing this behavior, but you know, they're drinking too much, they're doing cannabis, they're eating a lot. I mean, they're doing everything else, or smoking and vaping or whatever it is. It's like, so I'm still tapping into all of that, you know, so I'm really not, I haven't really had to deal with the underlying stuff, which is what I think recovery is founded on. So
it's kind of like an engine running in the background, and it has to be, you know, or here's my metaphors. Whack-a-mole is my favorite metaphor. You know, you hit the thing here and it pops up there. And unless you're able to deal with what's underneath, the issues, including anger and lack of empathy and lying, they just keep popping up because the whole thing hasn't been shut down. And by the way, that's what treatment's about, whether it's outpatient or inpatient or residential intensives. It's all about just stopping it, you know. Anyway, more questions. Sorry, that was fun. I like that question.
Okay, is a sexual, oops, wrong one. Is an honest polyamorous relationship a possibility for a gay male sex addict whose acting out involves casual anonymous sex with many other men?
So I don't know. Different people have different meanings for polyamorous. Polyamory is, by definition, I love more than one person, and I'm in a romantic and love relationship with more than one person. And people who are polyamorous, it's not unusual for three people to live together and have a relationship where all three of them share the children in the home. So polyamory just simply means being in love with more than one person. So I'm not sure if that's what you mean. But here's something I do know. I have worked with men. When I wrote Cruise Control, which is a book I wrote for gay men, at that time, sobriety, because it mostly came from the heterosexual world, was you got to be in a relationship, it's got to be committed, or you can't have sex. And, you know, all of this sort of, I would think, what I would consider to be very conservative or even rigid views about sexuality. But that's what recovering people needed, was something really clear in the beginning. But when you look at gay men and what we're dealing with, here's the deal. I worked with a gentleman for a number of years who used to have sex in public places. He would get arrested, he'd get taken out by security. I mean, it didn't matter. But night after night after night, he'd act out sexually anonymously. He had a tremendous amount of abuse and trauma in his background. By the time we were done working with each other, and I think I wrote this in Cruise Control, he had gotten to, after years of work, group therapy, 12-step, to where he had 2 or 3 friends you can call that what you like, buddies. And he would have dinner with them and he'd have sex and he'd spend the evening. So he was not in a committed relationship, but he wasn't out and having anonymous sex every night. He was actually in relationship with 2 or 3 people that he knew. He enjoyed the time with them and he enjoyed sex. I knew that based on the amount of abuse this man had, I don't know that he could ever really manage or tolerate a long-term, committed, intimate relationship. But it isn't my job to judge how he has found his peace. You know, I don't judge his sobriety. I think so. However, if you're here at the beginning, if you're the first 6 months, 8 months, a year, and you're saying, oh, I want to do all of this, but I don't want to call that addiction. I just want to be able to still do that. That's a whole different story because, in other words, some people want to embrace the things they're doing that are very addictive, and they then say, well, this is just my lifestyle. And so I think you have to really clearly figure out what is addiction from what is polyamory, lifestyle, all of that kind of stuff. Complicated question.
It is a complicated question, but what I heard in the story that you were sharing is that that person found meaningful relationships in a way that he could tolerate, but it wasn't just anonymous sex.
And he didn't hate himself anymore. He stopped hating himself, and the problems he had, getting in trouble, having people look at him like, what are you doing? You know, he used to fool around at the gym, and he has so much more self-esteem, but his needs are met, but they're not met in a way that you or I might want them met. But I don't think I mean, based on his history, I don't think he can handle that. But he's got 3 people. He's got 3 friends. Yes. So it's so much safer. And I consider that huge recovery. But when I wrote that book, I had people really upset with me. I'll tell you who later, who said, that's not sobriety. You can't say that. Those people aren't in a committed relationship. Not everyone's going to get there. Not everyone really wants one. So how are you sexual if that isn't your goal or what you're going to have? It's not like it's black or white. So anyway, thanks for the question.
Which is one of the things I think that is so different with, you know, sex addiction and these compulsive behaviors or food addiction. It's not like chemicals where you just stop. So you do have to evaluate the nuances and what is healthy for that person versus, you know, just not doing anything.
You know, Tammy, I really appreciate you mentioning that because it's worth a shout out that, you know, and we've worked with people who have drug and alcohol problems, and in some ways it's not easier to recover, but it's more simple because there's only 1 or 2 things you're dealing with. And it's really about altering your mood with drugs or alcohol. And that's it. And the really, I think, clear line that alcoholics and drug addicts are able to draw is either I drank or not, I used drugs or not, on or off. That's the way it is. But if you're a gambler and you go to the casino or you play fantasy football, you're playing in the stock market, it's very clear you've crossed some boundary. But you can live the rest of your life and love your life without drinking and using, and you can live the rest of your life and love your life without gambling. But if you have an eating disorder and you are an overeater and you tend to go toward obesity, obviously recovery is not stopping eating. This is what Tammy was talking about. You have to figure out, I mean, with someone in an eating disorder, if you don't mind my saying it, it might be, and it depends on the person. It might be eating between meals. It might be eating sugar. It might be going to buffets. You know, it could be the second helping. That person has to figure out exactly what, it might be gluten. You know, I don't know, but they're going to have their own list of behaviors and foods. And as long as they don't do those things, they can go to a meeting and say, I have a year sober in OA, but there has to be a defined behavior that it's okay and a defined one that isn't, and it can't be yes or no. It's the same with sex. You know, we're going to discount, dismiss, and push away behaviors that are clearly problematic in your life and are causing consequences, but we're not going to say no more sex. We have to look at what kind of sex and what is healthy for you. That said, it's nothing wrong with taking a little time out in the beginning.
So we've got a couple of food questions, and I'm going to skip to those because we're kind of talking about it. So the first one is, how does someone know if their eating is an escape addictive if they're not at an unhealthy weight?
So can I answer? So I have to, my favorite answer to that question comes from a group that I did. It was a women's recovery group. I don't know if I ever told you the story, Tammy. I don't know. And there was this really, really wonderful woman in group, and she was questioning something that she wanted to do. Like, is this a good idea or not? And then she realized, she said this in group, she said, you know what? When I just want to go do something and there's nothing wrong with it, like I want to go eat or meet with a friend, I just do it. But when I'm asking myself, is there something wrong with this, or is this a good idea? It's probably something worth noting. So, you know, healthy people who, you know, believe me, I would love to lose the 15 COVID pounds I have on me. Trust me, I was at the doctor today. I know exactly what I weigh, but I'm not unhealthy and I'm not hurting myself. And I don't judge myself harshly around that. So, but someone else might gain 15 pounds and their world would end. So Tammy, can you throw some, I know that you have worked in and around the eating disorder world. Can you throw some stuff in?
I can. I have my own recovery in this particular area. And it is, for me, it wasn't about the weight, although that can be a whole trippy thing for me too. But if I'm stressed out, am I at the fridge or pantry? And that's what I had to start looking at is, what am I, just like with a drink or whatever it is, what am I expecting out of whatever it is I'm reaching for? And if I'm intentional, if I just take that pause and think about, I can eat whatever it is but am I looking for it to do something for me? And food absolutely can, I can use it to numb out that comfort. I mean, there's stuff, like you're talking about the gluten and the sugar and, whatever.
Feels good.
Yeah. One of the hardest things for me to do was work on sugar, because I feel like I've had to give up so much, of all this, and to give up, and I haven't completely given it up, but to curtail it to a manageable place.
Like birthdays.
Well, just where I just don't have to go, get into, if I have to spend too much time thinking about it, then it's probably a problem, like you're talking about. It's so I don't want to ignore it, but I also don't want it to be a focus. So I have found what works for me is in that in-between space. But yes, I have maintained a basically healthy weight, but I have still struggled with the food thing. And it really is, if I'm thinking too much about it or I'm looking for it to do something for me, I should at least look at it.
Can I ask this? I just want to add one thing, because I'm not going to say that I follow this. I wish that I did, but it makes perfect sense to me. Someone said, well, when you go to the refrigerator or that cabinet, you're about to open it for that box of Triscuits. I mean, those Triscuit or two that you're going to eat. They said, the only thing you could eat was an apple, would you eat it? And, then you have to think, am I really hungry? Do I really, because an apple, I mean, they're okay, but it's not that exciting. And, half the time I close that refrigerator and walk away, because if I don't want something healthy, even if I could have the cake, the question kind of stops me. Does that make sense, Tammy?
Yes, it absolutely does. And then the next question is, can you describe a cake eater versus a love addict?
I know what love addicts are. There's lots of kinds of cake, so I'm not sure what that means. Is it, they want a metaphor?
Well, I was taking it very literally. It's like, okay, if I am, it's still the obsession. I always think about the hole in my soul, and I'm looking for something to fill that void, that spot
or
that wasn't okay for me. And whether it's, where it's externalized and, it's that person. And if I just have that person, and if they're paying attention to me, and if I get them, it's all going to be fine. Or that comfort of like, ooh, the cake or whatever it is, it feels good, or it numbs me out. That was my thought, but you may have a different take on it.
So I want to be sure what the question is. They want to compare, like, if cows are to milk, like butter is that like one of those? Is that what they're asking?
It says, can you describe a cake eater versus a love addict? So,
okay.
So if to me, it's like whatever I'm doing that I'm looking for it to do something for me other than just nutrition or whatever, to me, that's a challenge.
And I would throw out something that I say to the clients at our treatment program a lot. By the way, those are the little hats Tammy's wearing on either side of her head. Is Seeking Integrity is our treatment program. They're very cute, Tammy. I like that too. So I had a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, he was a therapist of mine, and he worked in an addiction center. And I asked him, we were talking about the metaphor of nutrition and sexual acting out. Now, I don't know about love addiction, but this one metaphor works for me. He said, and I'll put in love addiction. He said, chasing after people who are unavailable to you and trying to turn them into something they're not, when you're trying to get your needs met, is like eating potato chips when you're hungry. You can have a bag, and for the moment, it will quiet that hunger. But when you go home, if all you have is big bags of potato chips, you're just going to get sicker and sicker, because what we really seek is nutrition, okay, which means connection, love, family, home, community, creativity. You know, that's what we long for. And if we're filling it up with food or sex, first of all, we're not really getting to what needs to be gotten to, which is our life. And we're really distracting ourselves with something that is very much momentary. And oh, one more thing, shame. Both of those things come with, I'm not ashamed if I go have a cookie, even if I shouldn't have it. But if I had the whole box, I'd probably hate myself, or I'd have those feelings. So I don't want to do things that make me feel badly about myself. So, by the way, that's a balance for an addict. The temptation, well, it's a balance for everybody, you know, could I have that cookie or not? But the temptation between the idea of I'm tempted to do this, I really want to do this, it looks really good, it's going to be really fun, and also thinking about how I'm going to feel later, what are the consequences? That's kind of a balance for all of us. Addicts are almost disconnected. It's like all I'm thinking about is what I want to do addictively, and then oops, I forgot how terrible I'm going to feel. That's part of doing treatment with them, by the way, is reminding them of that. Anyway, I'm sorry I went on and on.
No, that was a great answer. That was actually, I think that was spot on. So then let's continue along that theme. Is it okay for a sex addict to numb uncomfortable feeling with health activities such as exercising, or should all numbing behavior be addressed even if it's in a healthy, non-compulsive activity?
Well, I think there's a few things to unpack there, like what is healthy? And by the way, you know, as much as Tammy and I believe in not using behaviors or substances to escape your reality, that doesn't mean that Tammy doesn't exercise every day to make herself feel better and reduce anxiety. She does it for her body too, but she does do it to alter her mood and set the mood for the day. So, but I don't think, I'm just speaking for you, I don't think that keeps her from doing her job, or she's so thin that she's ill, or her body can't do it, but she keeps doing it anyway. You know, it's not unhealthy for her. So, you know, I love being creative. I love singing. I love creating things. And, you know, could I be in choir too many days a week? I suppose, if it was affecting my life negatively. But yeah, I think there are lots of things that healthy people do to change their mood, but we don't keep them a secret. We don't hide them. We don't feel ashamed about them. And there's just a whole levels of difference there. Does that help?
Yes, and I agree with you. I think it's finding the balance, just like you were talking about a little bit ago. It's finding the balance. If I was exercising 6 hours a day every day, you know, that's compulsive. And like with everything in my life, I have struggled with, you know, if I don't exercise, I'm going to get fat. You know, and like,
I did.
wow, what a lot of, you know, mental energy, and I'm not in that place anymore. You know, it took work, and I have done that, but now I do it, and I'm intentional while I'm out there. I'm not thinking about how many calories I'm burning. I don't even pay attention to that. I'm thinking about, look at, you know, the scenery, and, you know, the sun is coming up.
And you're listening
whatever.
to disco.
I'm listening to disco. I absolutely am. That helps me a lot, you know, so I've made it, you know, a thing. But, you know, I'm paying attention while I'm doing that. And we all need a mental health escape, you know, like, you know, whether it's
Movies. What do you think of movies
yes,
for?
I was going to say, I love watching, you know, certain movies that take me in, that I'm not distracted by, because then I'm paying attention to that, and I am getting a mental health break. We need those. It's just, for me as an addict, I can tend to go too far with it.
I also want to say that when we're involved in things in life that are problematic, we're much more likely to notice faster than something we're addicted to. So I was thinking of, I have a little tendency to sit on my pad and look at stuff. And sometimes I'm doing it in the presence of my spouse. And, you know, that's fine until if I want to spend a little time before dinner, after dinner. But when I start to hear, when are you going to get out of that thing? And when are we going to talk? And why are you always in your computer? And, you know, in the past, I would have said as an addict, well, you don't understand how important this is to me, and I need my time. But that separates people. And what I needed to do is listen to him and say, oh, this is getting a little excessive. And believe me, my brain just wants to spend another 3 hours in that computer. I could lose myself right there. But connection is calling me, and I'm paying attention. Because when connection calls me and I'm in an addiction, I don't want to hear it at all. I want to block it out.
Great answer. So, is betrayal connected to people that were molested, abused? So, is betrayal connected to people that were molested, abused?
Well, lots of people get betrayed who don't have those histories. You never know what someone's going to do to you.
So would you, I'm trying to figure out if they're asking if they were abused or molested, are they also betrayed? Like,
No, I think what they're saying is someone has a history of abuse and molestation more likely to be betrayed later in life. I think that's what they're saying.
Okay.
I think. And, my response to, look, everyone who has trauma, we all have trauma early in life. And depending on some people have little traumas, some people have big traumas, but we all have disappointments. How about that? But if you're consistently disappointed and you're young, you have to learn how to tolerate that disappointment because it's not going away. And then it becomes just the way things are. And so later in life, we can walk into situations where someone else might say, oh, that doesn't look right, or I shouldn't do that, or this, but we don't see the problem because we grew up with something, so that kind of tension, whatever that was, whereas someone else would say, I wouldn't want to go into that situation. We do, because it's not uncomfortable for us. This works two ways, by the way. I'm a therapist who can talk about very difficult things with people. And the reason I can talk about difficult things with people is because very difficult things have happened to me, and I had to work through them. And it allows me to be able to go into arenas with people where other people might feel shy or embarrassed or uncomfortable. But so it can be positive. But if I'm basing my relationship choices and the way that's playing out on my history without any insight, it would be likely that those two things are tied together.
So I think this was an elaboration of it. Is betrayal connected to someone that was molested and then went and molested minors? To me, that's offender behavior, and that I would take betrayal out of that. What are your thoughts?
I think we should get another question.
Okay. All right. So how does someone make a healthy line around sugar and caffeine? I can tell what I did. I had to have an accountability for it.
That was my word.
I was going to say it was, I'm in part of this little group, and somebody decided that we should have a 30-day challenge with no sugar. And I thought, shoot me now. But I was like, okay, if I'm ever going to do this, and this is something that I'd been struggling with for a long time. If I'm ever going to do this, the time is now. And so as part of the accountability group, I committed to doing that. And that was how I finally, literally years, it was my last thing. I was like, I'm never giving this up. But it was bothering me. And so
Tam, I have a question about that story.
Yes.
I have a question about your story.
Yes.
Did you make this accountability for 30 days and then not talk to those people again until day number 30?
Oh, no. It was accountability every day. We checked in.
Oh,
yes. That's what I mean. It was accountability. It was like we posted, it was a little Facebook group, and we posted, how we were doing with it. And, and I live a program of integrity and honesty. So, it's like whatever I chose to do that day, I knew I was going to have to post on the Facebook group. That made me be really willing to.
So
I wanted to do it, and I wanted to be part of the group and be able to share. I was willing to share whatever my truth was. So,
well, I just really wanted to reinforce, what you just said, and that's why I brought that up, because being accountable is. I've had clients who said, I can't get 30 days of sobriety. I don't think I could possibly get 30 days of sobriety. And I'll say to them, do you think you could be sober until we see each other in 4 or 5 days? Or could you call me each night and let me know? Can we break it up into little pieces? So absolutely the word accountability was exactly what I was thinking. But I also think it's about, being accountable a lot in the beginning, because it's, we're so used to just listening to ourselves or deciding for ourselves or making up stories like that wasn't really important to me. Those people, are telling ourselves. So I just think the more we stay connected, the better with our own bad thoughts, problematic thoughts.
Well, and I really thought I was going to, I told my husband, I'm going to be horrible because I'm going to go through withdrawal. It's going to be awful. I just want you to know in advance and all of that. And I was shocked at how, I think because I placed so much emphasis on how horrible it was, I got through the first day and I was like, I made it. I got through the second day and I was like, I'm still okay. And I haven't lashed out at anybody, so I was kind of surprised at how much easier it was than I thought it was going to be. Not that it was without its own thing, but I think because I was willing and accountable, it worked. So, and honestly, I've been able to maintain a much more reasonable, healthy interaction with sugar.
Well, because you can. Now it isn't because you did that.
Yes.
Although I wish I had a spousal alarm like you do. Like, hey, honey, I'm going to be horrible for the next 3 weeks. Just letting you know. I wish I could get that.
Well, he knew this was a biggie deal for me, and that I was really going to try. And so
I'm impressed.
He was willing. Yeah. So, okay. So the next one, what is healthy independence? I think you use the term interdependence. So why don't you talk about that?
Well, I don't know if can I do this with my background? I can. So where'd you go, Tammy?
I'm fixing my blinds. But I didn't want to stand up. So.
Oh, okay.
There.
Okay. Do I need to, I don't have blinds. But I do have a little sun, but that's okay. So I remember from graduate school, and I was in my second year, and there was a teacher there who was teaching about healthy relationships. And she wanted to give us a physical example in front of us of what a healthy relationship was and what caused relationship problems. And so she said, here are two people, right? And this is a relationship. They come together and then they come apart. And then they come back together, maybe for a while. And then they come apart, maybe for a while. This is the nature of interdependence. You can exist of yourself in your world, and you also are dependent on someone to help you negotiate. They're the foundation. They're the thing that helps you get out to do this, and you lean and depend on them. But you are still able to, by yourself and on your own, go out into your world, whatever that is, and be you, because you aren't so dependent that you're not functional. So interdependence. There's one more thing I wanted to say about that. Oh, what causes relationship problems? The teacher was very smart. I never forgot this 30 years later. She said, so when there's a relationship problem, it's because these two people aren't able to come together. They're too independent. And other relationship problems are caused by these people are kind of, we would say, enmeshed, stuck together, and they're really not able to be independent and dependent. And if you want to know interdependent, it's I'm independent, I'm dependent, I'm independent, I'm dependent. This, by the way, comes from a healthy childhood. You can guess is learning independence and still trusting the person's going to be there. So those of us who didn't have the best experiences growing up, I wouldn't expect. This is where we get stuck with too much, too little, all that kind of stuff. So I hope that's helpful.
That was very helpful. Thank you. So the next question, D-Day was 4 years ago, 38-year marriage. He's been in and out of recovery, and his relapses have been gay porn. Husband disclosed recently he is now bisexual, but still wants only me in our marriage. I am a heterosexual woman and struggling with this. Can a bisexual man be faithful? How can he not fulfill both desires? I'm hurting when he wants to watch gay TV and ask. He does not do that anymore or go to gay bars. We have not talked about this much. He's starting with a new CSAT and program.
Well, I want to say that we've had a lot of folks with this issue, and a lot of couples, a number of couples who are in their 60s or even 70s. And I'm not going to speak about you guys. I don't know your situation, but I do. Do you think it's okay if I just say a few of the things we've been running into lately?
Yes, because this has been kind of prevalent lately. So I think sharing could be very useful.
So I'm 58, and my generation of gay men, I came out in the crazy 70s, and, being gay was kind of in, like transgenderism and fluidity is now, until AIDS and HIV in the 80s. Then gay was definitely not in. But there was a while in the 70s when it was very, very popular. And, everyone wanted to know about it and experience it and all that stuff. There are men from my generation who mostly came out because we lived through watching AIDS and we survived that. And and plus because it was much more liberal environment that I grew up in the 70s, it was much easier to come out. I grew up when gay was at least interesting. There was lots of prejudice, but there were parades. The world had begun to change. But I often find that men who are the next older boomer part, like they're 65 to 75 or 60 to 75, maybe they're a little bit older than me. they grew up in a different generation. They grew up in the 50s and 60s. There's more Eisenhower, more like everyone looked the same, you know, no racial issues, no, like everything was, you know, and so they learned a lot of homophobia, like how horrible, and there was no outlet for them to look at that world and say, oh, will that be okay? So a lot of men of that generation married, and stayed married, even though their primary interest was in men, because they could perform sexually with their wives. They usually don't go out and have a lot of sex with other women, but their desire to be with men still pulls them into gay porn and casual sex and all that stuff while they continue to live with the person that they truly love. And they split their lives apart because they're very motivated to have sex with men. And in fact, that is probably their primary interest. But they love their spouse. And they, as a gentleman said to me recently, I never thought of myself as someone who wouldn't be married, wouldn't have kids. Again, if you grew up in the early 60s, late 50s, that was the expectation for everyone. So he's fulfilling the destiny that was laid out for him in the culture and the time he grew up in. And he's never come out. Some of these men, by the way, when they would have come out, it was HIV/AIDS. And that's when they were in their 30s. And so they wanted to stay in their marriages and have nothing to do. So there's been a whole bunch of cultural issues that have driven men older than me to stay in the closet and stay married. I know quite a few. So the problem is when these couples come to talk to me or Tammy and they say, a wife will say, I know my husband's into men. I know he is. I know that's what turns him on. If he would just tell me. And these husbands like twist themselves inside out because they're afraid that the spouse is going to leave. They're afraid the spouse is going to hate them. They're afraid they're going to lose this long-term relationship they've had for 30 years or whatever. So they refuse to tell the truth. And I've seen these couples end up in therapy where the guy who's clearly pretty much homosexual denies it, blames his mother, throws up smoke. He'll do anything but just tell the truth because he so wants to stay with this person. And what that deprives the spouse of is their sanity. Because for 20 years, they've been saying, I think my husband's gay. My husband seems to look at men, blah, blah, blah. And the man says, it's gaslighting. No, that's not what I am. No, that's not what you're seeing. I don't know what you're talking about. Or I have that interest, but I would never pursue it. You're my number one. But she doesn't feel that way. So all I'm saying is we have couples coming to us now who are in their 60s and 70s saying, we have lived like this for 30 years. And usually the spouse has said, I don't care what he's doing. Female spouse, I don't care. We're in our 60s. We're probably not going to break up, but I want to know what's going on. So back to your question. I think you have every right in your home to say, this is not acceptable to me. I don't want it in my home. I don't want you looking at that. I do think, though, that there are other questions that need to be asked, like, is this something you really enjoy? How do you enjoy it? What does it mean to you? Because if it's a significant part of his life and his orientation, and you're saying, I don't want you looking at that, well, how is he going to satisfy that need? And is he going to go somewhere else? And anyway, there's so many questions and so much meat on this bone. I just simply want to say that I have run into lately a lot of men who really claim heterosexuality, but that's not who they are. And they do love their partners and they do love their kids and their family, but that's not who they are. And increasingly their spouses are saying, I'm not okay with the lies. I could live with your being whatever you are, but I'm not okay with the lies. And I went through all that because I feel like this is someone who's kind of asking that question.
And I agree. And like I said, there have been a number, like we just talked about, there have been a number of couples who have been struggling with that. And I think having the clarification. So one of the things, I'm just going to put a plug in for it because this is how some of these couples are figuring this out, is Dr. Rob does do a consultation online, a 90-minute Zoom session. It's a very specific thing. You can reach out to me if you're interested in more information, but it can be really helpful, I think, in identifying issues, whatever they are around this, it can be for a couple or individual. So,
well, speaking of that time, I mean, I'm amazingly skillful, right? That's just
you are,
and shy about it. But, we
you
all
not,
have different,
so.
we all have different skills. We are all good at different things as therapists. And I really believe my best skill is evaluation. I can almost, within half an hour of sitting someone or an hour or so sitting with a couple, really understand where they're at. And I'm not doing therapy, but kind of like, what is up with these people? And they're lost, and I'm not standing back and looking at it. And, I have worked with couples like that, where I've said, walks like a duck, talks like a duck. I think your husband's a homosexual. The spouse says, thank God, that's what I've been thinking for years. And the husband looks like, you mean all I need to do is, like, it's like a revelation that all he needed to do was tell her after 30 years. So sometimes I'm the one who has to say something that's in the room, but the elephant no one wants to talk about. And other times it's more about, I know you're doing this, but maybe you should do more of that or something like that. But anyway, Thanks, Tammy. We're busy, but I appreciate it.
Next one. What's the line between healthy watching and overwatching?
Watching what?
I'm assuming either porn or like where do you draw the line?
Because I think this might be about bodies, like
it could be. That could
checking
be. Yeah.
people out.
Okay. Let's answer it that way.
Well, I guess, here's a great measure. If someone you really care about, or a spouse, but someone you really love who's not a sex addict and not inappropriate anyway, but who you trust, if they're walking down the street with you and they saw how long you looked at someone, how would they feel? If it was them you're looking at, how would they feel? Now, all I'm trying to get is an objective measure, because you don't have an objective measure. Some of us look at someone's butt and 5 minutes could go by. We're practically following them. Others just like, oh, that's attractive, and they move on. And so, where you're at in the continuum and what's healthy for you, I can't say. But I think a good measure of it always is, well, if someone was with me and they knew what I was thinking and they knew what I was looking at, they probably wouldn't mind if I said, oh, cute butt, and moved on. But if I started staring, walking behind them and said, oh, well, what I'd like to do with that butt is, I think the objectivity is your best measure. And also, by the way, if that person turned around and said to you, I know how long you've been looking at me and I know what you've been looking at, how would you feel?
That's good too. And I hear often from people in emails or phone calls where they're talking about, and he, let's just say he is staring at, he's flirting with, we're at a restaurant and all he does is, and so like they're uncomfortable with the amount of attention that is being displayed. So, okay.
And
next.
And the person who's staring doesn't listen. Like, oh, this is how the other side of that conversation goes. Why are you making this up? And I'm just looking, and she's attractive. Why don't you take a look at her too? Isn't she attractive? And why do you bring this up? I love you. That's what the other side sounds like.
Yeah. So I gotta read. When I am accountable to someone such as a sponsor or friend, calling them every day and reporting honestly makes me feel controlled. It reminds me the very strict control of my mother. I end up acting out just to rebel against a sponsor. I am able to put much more sober time together without reporting to someone on a daily basis. Is it possible that the 12-step approach does not work for every person, given our different childhoods?
Well, that's a challenging question. You want to give that a whack before I try?
Well, I was thinking, first of all, you've identified the issue. Rob knows this about me. When I get told to do something or whatever, I fall right into that. I absolutely do. And so what I have to do is reframe it for myself. I had someone a long time ago that said, you can't drink anymore. And I was like, oh, honey, like immediately went into that. Oh, yes, I can. And I just was like, what is that? So what I have learned to do for myself is reframe it is, I have an opportunity to do this differently. I have an opportunity to call my sponsor. I'm going to check in with my sponsor. I'm doing this for me. It's not because I have to, it's because I want to. When I want to do something, I'm a whole lot better about it than when I have to. So for me, really reframing it, because I really do think the accountability is important, partly because of the connection. Because if you're talking to your sponsor, guess what? That's healthy connection with somebody else. So I would invite you to look at it in a different way, reframe it that it's, you don't have to do it. You're choosing to do it. You get to do it because your recovery is more important than whatever story you were telling yourself.
Well, you could carry that all by yourself, Tammy. I was just going to add a few little things. Those of us who have different kinds of abuse in childhood sometimes choose people that reflect that, especially if they're in an authority position. And I wonder who you're choosing. On the one hand, I might want to choose someone who's kind of gentle and, you come to me when you need me. And I've had sponsors who say, I don't want you calling me every day. You call me when you need me. And I expect to hear from you when you need me. And if I heard you needed something and didn't call me, I'm going to get upset. But that's not you may not need a sponsor who says, I want this on the 5th of the month that's not who you are. But there are sponsors. There's nothing in the 12-step programs you have to say that says you must speak to your sponsor every day. That's really up to the relationship that you're in. So if it were me, I would avoid a relationship that is that sort of mechanical, but I know myself. On the other hand, I'd like nothing better but than someone who kind of just lets me do whatever I want, and they're still hanging in there with me. And so I know what every addict truly needs is someone who'll tell them the truth, speaking truth to power, if you will. And so it's very important that this person is willing to have some boundaries around, you know, give you some space, but also say, hey, we have some agreements. And by the way, I want to say, support Tammy's comment. Why are you doing this? I get annoyed at so many things I have to do in life that I don't want to do, like staying home for months at a time. But I do them because that's what everybody has to do, and those are the rules, and like it or not, that's what I have to do. As I told Tammy years ago, I got a jaywalking ticket. And I was so mad. Why did they give me in? I was just walking, and there's tons of people walk around the street. What's the big deal? And I got into the gym, and I was in early recovery, and I started thinking, well, wait a minute. That was a great lesson. Because what I'm being told without getting in a whole lot of trouble is just pay attention to the rules. Just follow the rules. So I don't know, you know, whoever you set up for yourself, make sure that you are accountable to something. And mostly, by the way, this is about being accountable to ourselves. That person is just helping us. They're not taking charge of our lives. We're asking them to help us. As Tammy said, it's not a have to. I try being grateful that they're willing to be in my life and help me because I'm not paying them. And they're actually willing to take time. That's a gift to me. And you might try that hat on.
Thank you. So the next question, what does withdrawal look like during recovery from sexual addiction?
It's a set of feelings. The best way I've heard it described, and this would kind of make sense, is a lot of longing, a lot of emotional longing, a lot of missing someone, something, a lot of loneliness. So I think the way the brain, you know, we are so busy numbing ourselves out and being disconnected, because you're always disconnected when you're lying and keeping secrets and have a double life, that when we stop all that, but we haven't really plugged back into connection, reduced our shame, you know, really worked on it a lot, I think we're very lonely, and we feel very, you know, it's a sad feeling, I think. And it's because if you think about it, we've been finding a way to use fantasy to feel great, or orgasm, or you know, go that way, go that way. When you cut that off and your brain is sort of balancing, you're going to sit in the doghouse for a little while and not feel good. And the way I've heard it described and the way I experienced it was like a tremendous longing, almost like, where's mom and dad? Is somebody going to take care of me because I'm so alone, even if there's people around? That's what I think it really feels like.
So the next question, I'm a sex and love addict, and I'm starting to, I'm a sex and love addiction, and I'm starting no contact rule. My husband does not accept this and continues texting me. The marriage is very uncomfortable, and I feel emotionally betrayed. Any tips to stay strong on no contact?
I have thoughts. I think
Please
this is I think this is also about accountability. So here's a few thoughts. Another story. I was in a 12-step meeting not that long ago. I was sitting in an SLAA meeting, and a man was, make a 28, 35-year-old man, was pretty much tearful that he wasn't going to be able to keep this woman out of his life, that she was going to call or reach out, and what was he going to do when she texted him? And what was she going to do? Because he was just overwhelmed. He was afraid he'd go back to her. And, you know, I can't say anything at meetings. So I just thought to myself, the answer, because sometimes I know the answer, and the answer was block her number, block her text, make sure that she can't get in touch with you in any way so that you don't have to sit around and worry. So, you know, you set a boundary with him, and then if that isn't respected, you can go a whole lot further. You know, there's this thing about boundaries. So sorry, Tammy, I'm full of stories today. Someone explained boundaries to me like a tent, like a little pup tent that's out in the woods. I don't even know if people know what pup tents are. Little like solo tent for one person. And most tents, you know, they have a zipper or Velcro. And the question is, well, actually the answer is, what does someone with boundaries look like in that scenario? And what someone looks like who has boundaries there is the opening to the pup tent is on the inside. They can unzipper it if they want to let someone in. They can look out or keep it closed, but they're in charge of whether people can come in or whatever that is. But if you don't have boundaries, your zipper's on the outside. Anybody can come up and talk to you or ask you for things or use you or demand things. So I really think for you, it's about what kind of boundaries do you want to have? rather than what he does or how he does it or any of those kinds of things. And you can certainly, I had someone get a restraining order today, and I thought, good for you, girl. That is the right thing to do. You know, you got to protect yourself and your family, and you don't want to go back to where you were.
So on Saturday, Louise Stanger used this for boundaries: compassionate directness. And I thought, wow, that's really good. And I'm thinking, even on this, compassionate directness is you are taking charge for yourself. I love the, block the number, get a new phone number, whatever it is you need to do to keep yourself safe, because clearly this person, even with set boundaries, is overstepping. So, the person said overwatching was for TVs and movies.
What was the other half of that question?
Well, it was like watching versus overwatching.
Oh,
so.
Well, okay. I want to answer that question since we have a minute. It's about staying connected. One of my sponsors said that the way, it was a woman, because I'm a gay guy, so it's good to have a woman sponsor for me. She said, the way I got through my first year of recovery was watching movies. Didn't mean she didn't go to 12-step meetings, have friends, go to therapy, work. But when she was emotionally challenged, she just turned on a movie. And does that mean she worked through it all? No, but she got through the night. She felt better. She went to sleep. Every night does not have to be analysis. Why do I feel this way? What does it mean? This one day at a time thing is really just about getting to the next day. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. Tammy, let me just say two things. We're doing really well. We're doing really, really good treatment. So I just want to say seekingintegrity.com is our treatment program. We treat men who have sex and intimacy disorders, and we also treat men who have drug and sex and intimacy disorders, because they really go together well. And we're really working with the family and the partners. I've been doing this a long time, so I'm pretty proud of our program and your help, Tammy. And again, folks, Sex, Love, and Addiction is the podcast. Oh, and it's pretty popular. By the way, we had 8,000 downloads this week, Tammy. On Friday nights at 6 o'clock California time on intherooms.com. You can find me every week. I volunteer an hour there, sadly without Tammy. And you can ask questions. You have more of them. Also, you can reach me at rob@seekingintegrity.com. Tammy, T-A-M-I, at seekingintegrity.com. We give resources, we give referrals, we encourage you to read books. We're glad to help out if there's something we can offer. So thanks for that little plug, Tammy, and thank you for your time.
Well, we've got another question, and we've got a couple.
Oh, we got 5 more minutes. Oh, see, I'm so hungry. I'm sorry, it's my tummy.
It's okay. I want to plug in on one of the only chemsex meetings Dr. David Fawcett does on intherooms.com on Tuesday nights. So, it's co-occurring. You don't have to go to 2 different meetings. You can go to 1 meeting. So join that. And we just had Super Saturday Recovery Summit on In the Rooms on Saturday, which went great. And we're going to do
That's a lecture series.
It is, and it will be the 3rd week of August, which is August 15th. So we'll have the next one. We'll be posting the information this week. So, and
am I talking about prodependence, the one in August?
I have you listed as talking about codependence. About on the list of things that we were hoping to talk about today was that, but I got you down. So, so my husband has been emotionally distant from me for the past 2 years since the day of adultery. Since the D-Day of the adultery. I have recorded conversations between my husband and the married woman he cheated with when he expressed many emotions. He claims he did not have a connection with this woman who I knew, yet he displayed amazing empathy and understanding with her. I am confused about where my husband's true feelings lay.
Who knows? And I mean that most sincerely, because it's very typical for me in treatment, whatever form we're doing, to get a man who comes in, and I always know the answer to this question. He says, I don't know which one I want to be with. And of course, I know what he means. I'm having an affair and I'm married, or a woman. I hear this from women too. And I don't know which one. I don't know which one. And I love this person for these reasons. And I'm like this with this person. And, and my inevitable answer is, you need to live alone, because you're playing with people's lives and you don't even know what you want, or you're saying you don't know what you want. I would rather the girlfriend and the wife get together, tell their own stories, and realize who the real bad guy is, which is neither one of you, it's him. But in a more realistic way, I certainly wouldn't tolerate this. I think that discovery is a moment of revelation that requires a whole bunch of things that happen after. And they're fairly concrete and they're fairly specific, and you'll feel it if it's going in the right direction. This just feels like a slide sideways. And And, you know, are there any consequences for him breaking this boundary of communicating with that woman? And even if you're reading old texts and emails, part of what she said is, I don't understand how he could be so empathic and kind and loving to this other woman. Well, have you ever tried to seduce someone? Have you ever been in an intense romance? The kind of empathy I have if I'm in romance, I'm constantly saying, oh, I get you, and I understand. And that's like that thrill of love at the beginning, you know? So I wouldn't say, you know, real love is when you try to work through problems with someone you've been with for a while, that's real love. So I wouldn't take the seduction, the romanticizing, the affair stuff and compare that to your marriage, because it's not comparable. And the men, by the way, don't get this sometimes. They're like, well, it's so much easier with the affair partner. I'm like, yeah, because she doesn't do laundry. She doesn't have kids. She doesn't up at 4 a.m. trying to, you know, help you when you have the runs. So yeah, it's much easier to be with someone who looks great and, you know, you don't have your responsibilities. They don't even get this sometimes. So in any case, I would fret less about him and put more focus on how you can find happiness, because this man sounds like he's pretty troubled.
Yeah, and I'm like 2 years. If he hasn't made great strides in doing things differently, that's a long time. And I'm really sorry you heard the recordings. It's one of those things when there's that kind of level of disclosure and discovery, and partners, you can't unhear it. And so it's, you know, it's constantly. So I'd also really encourage you to work with a good trauma therapist to help. You can't take it away, but you can at least help. And the impact, I can only imagine how that's affecting you on a daily basis. So.
Well, and just saying that, Tammy, that the 2 years of what you're going through is traumatic. It's like your husband has cancer and you don't know if he's going to do the chemo or not, and he's getting sicker and sicker, and he says, oh yeah, I'll go to the doctor, and you're having to live with the result. That's horrible. But he's not sick in a way that he's not taking the direction and doing the things he needs to do. He's staying sick for himself. And that's a whole different circumstance for you.
So there's one more quick question, and we got just 2 minutes. Okay. Any tips about good boundaries? This is always a great question for a love addict, anxious, avoidant style.
Well, I don't think it doesn't matter to me whether you're anxious, avoidant, or you're incredibly desperate for connection. Your behavior is the same, you know? So this is about dating. Am I right about that?
Boundaries, just boundaries.
Well, it would depend on whether I was with someone for a long time or this was a new relationship. Why don't you give a clue, Tammy, because I'm not quite sure about the question, and I'll jump in.
I think boundaries are good things that I do for myself that keep me safe, but connected to people in a healthy way. So if I have somebody who is not safe, I need to have thicker boundaries around that person, but I still need to be connected. I can't set up so many boundaries that I'm in, a castle with a moat around it. I'm the only one there. I want to have connections. So if this person isn't as safe for me, I'm going to have bigger boundaries around that person, but this person is safe. They show up for me. I know I've got, I know I can call them any time of the day or night. I want to have, I want to have connection with that person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I want to give a more concrete example really quickly. Is like, I have a colleague who has some pretty difficult family, but he really still wants to be connected to them. So he told me, when I go see XYZ at the holidays, I stay in a hotel. I don't stay in their house. And when I go over for 2 hours, not the whole afternoon, because things can get bad after a while. And I want to have the connection, but I don't want to talk about difficult things. I don't want to get into drama. So making those choices, how long you'll spend, where you stay, what issues sometimes people say, okay, news, weather, and sports. That's all I'm going to talk about, news, weather, and sports. That's a boundary. I'm not going to get into drama with people. Oh, I don't want to talk about today. Thanks. It's my boundary. And you don't have to say what your boundary is. You can just know what it is inside and stick to it. So, and there's tons of books on this, by the way.
Yes.
And easy to find.
Yes. And they're listed on our sexandrelationshiphealing.com site. There's a resource for books. So.
Indeed. And you know what? We're going to do a couple series, and it's going to include a session on boundaries. It
will. That's true. August 22nd on seekingintegrity.com. You'll find out more information, or you can always email me. Thanks, Dr.
Bye,
Rob.
guys.
Go eat dinner.
Have a good evening. Dinner time.
Bye.